We have a new frame, but I also have something different planned for this frame. A mystery.
How exciting.
I'm not going to tell you what the frame will be used for. Instead, I'm going to leave hints throughout this whole video, and the person who guesses correctly down in the comments below will win this. So we have the Trifox X10, and this is a cheap Chinese carbon road bike, and you can purchase this directly from Trifox or you can buy it from AliExpress. Now, because of what I have planned for this bike, I actually bought it second hand from eBay. And it's better that it is cheaper. Quite a bargain. Now I must admit, on first impressions, this frame looks really good visually. I've always liked it when the carbon fibre weave is on display. The frame comes in 3 colours, red, white and camo. This is the white version. It's easy to be impressed on initial inspection, but let's look in more detail. The frame is pretty bulky, let's call it aero, and I actually quite like it. Now the main tubing is particularly large and all the tubing has curved shape. The top tube is a top tube, not too much to say about it. I do like the colour scheme though, it looks nice with the black and white combo. It's much the same when we look inside the top tube as well. Everything seems to be in order. I'm no carbon expert, if only I knew one. So if you do see something out of the ordinary, leave a comment down below. As far as I can see, there was no wrinkling, cracks or anything sort of suspicious or looked different or odd. The down tube is thick. I seem to gravitate to these thicker tubes. We also have the wheel shaping or cutout, whatever you want to call it, on the down tube for the front wheel. Now inside the down tube, I took the plunge through the headset into the down tube, and at the very top we can see there are lines running through the tubes. Maybe these are different layers of carbon. You can clearly see where the bottle cage inserts are as well, and the shards of carbon that are sort of protruding around them. I then went in from the bottom bracket, attacking the frame from all angles it appears. I saw this random thing in there. I have no idea what it is, maybe a frame number or something. There was also this other random thing that I thought was a cable guide at first, but I actually think it's carbon because when the camera hit it, it was super stiff. I'm not too sure, let me know what you think. Now the seat tube on this bike has this sort of straight into curve shape. It reminds me of the Cervelo S5 seat tube, but just far less exaggerated. I actually really like this style. I didn't at first, but it's grown on me. Inside there seems to be loads going on. At the top there seems to be white paint. With a scrub it wasn't coming off, so it's there to stay. We can see what I believe to be wrinkles where the seat stays actually connect to the seat tube. It's quite interesting actually, and satisfying the nerdy side of my brain with this endoscope. Not gonna lie, I've been in a carbon fibre rabbit hole for the last few days. My obsessive nature. Further down we have the bottle cage inserts, and then we have the 3 bolts that mount the front derailleur hanger. Now normally this isn't removable, but on this bike it is. Again, you can see the shards of carbon around all the inserts. Then we can see the bottom bracket cups from above. Loads of wrinkling, I assume because they're trying to get the extra carbon around the bottom bracket for extra reinforcement. The rear triangle is made up of the seat stays and the chain stays. The tubing on the inside of these is actually flat, which I quite like. The frame does only accept a 25mm wide tyre though, so for all you huge tyre lovers, it's going to be okay. There are plenty more fish in the sea. This is a through axle frame and the front and rear through axles both came with it. Paintwork is probably one of the biggest signs of quality, and an area where quality is obvious. I've got more lights than Blackpool Beach in here, and my 4K camera is working overtime so we can get a closer look. The head tube, this has a nice flare shape and the paintwork does look good. The carbon weave is really popping. There was no issues with the head tube that I could see. The top tube was much the same. The colours do look good, as I said earlier. On the down tube I saw these 2 imperfections. Now I'm not sure what they are, but they are clearly visible and in an obvious place as well. They were under the clear coat and no amount of polish or grease was going to get them off. Maybe I'm being picky, but now that I've seen them, it's quite hard to unsee them. You can also see where the carbon weave fades to dark black. I assume this is for the build-up of the thicker carbon around the bottom bracket. The seat tube had a couple of dimples. There were a few around the frame, but they were very hard to spot, I must admit. My electricity bill was going to be about £500 with the amount of lights I've got on in here. Bottle holder mount seemed okay, and as this is a used frame, if there were issues, I'm sure they would be more visible. The paint on the rear triangle looked equally delicious. Paint around the derailleur hanger. Now this is where things turn south. Now I can see there is some paint that has already flaked away. Now this is because the hanger is a really tight fit because of the extra thickness from the paint. As I was filming this, you can see a piece of paint flaked away, and this is just by me pushing it into the frame, not even tightening it. Emotional damage! It's also the same story for the caliper mounts. These have not been faced, so there are paint cracks where the calipers have been mounted. It was also the same for the caliper mounts on the forks. You can see the paint here is sort of flaky. Now there were also a few dimples on the forks, but again, nothing that's going to make you wake up in the middle of the night in a hot sweat. It's worth noting I am pretty picky, and this is a very cheap frame. The glossy clear coat really does finish it off well. All the decals are covered by a clear coat with no raised decals. Overall, not a disaster, but when you see finishing touches aren't complete, it does make me wonder what else could there be. Let's have a look at the bottom bracket where all of those watts pass through your legs into your machine. This frame has a BB 68, meaning the width of the bottom bracket should be 68mm and the diameter of the threads should be 34mm. Now I measured the width and it was 69.2, which makes sense when you add in the paint layers. The left cup was pretty much 34mm. I measured in different locations and angles to get a rough average. Now the threads look good on the left and the right cups. This is vital because threaded bottom brackets have a really high thread count, basically loads of rotations over a short length. Now this gives the thread much more strength, but it also makes the threads more vulnerable and it's easier to cross thread. The non-dry side went on a treat without an issue. I must admit, it's far easier than a press fit bottom bracket. Everything seemed to be in line and looked okay to the naked eye. That basically means nothing. Then the non-dry side went on a treat as well. We saw the bottom bracket earlier in the endoscope shot. There was a lot going on in there. There appears to be an aluminium plate as well that goes from one side to the other. I'm guessing that this will help to make both holes align. It also means that the routed cables go straight under it. Geometry wise, a Trifox is an aggressive position. It's a racing frame essentially. Now with Chinese carbon frame manufacturers, often frames simply do not come in big sizes. That is not the case here. If you take a size 56, a large Trifox X10, and compare it to a giant Propel 2022, medium large, then some of the vital measurements come out very similar. Trifox do 5 sizes, so there is an XL as well, which is bigger than the measurements I've just given. Cable routing. Now this frame is not designed for fully integrated cables, so cables through the bars and the frame, which for some will be music to their ears.
Of course.
It is semi-routed though. You didn't get off that lightly.
Goodness me.
You have entry points into the head tube on the right and left hand side of the frame where your cables will enter. Then you have exits at the rear. On the left, for example, is where the brake cable will come out, and on the right where the gear cable will come out. The front brake cable enters the fork towards the top of the fork and exits near the bottom on the left side. Now under the bottom bracket, we can see this little cover and we can take this on or off, and that shows us where the cables are actually routed through the frame. It seems like a well-designed system with the cables clearly routed, and then you can actually cover them completely, stopping the whole weld from getting inside. Luckily for me, I'm not going to have to use this because this frame is going to be, oh, almost gave everything away. The seat post and clamp. Now this seat post is a proprietary shape and it is specific to this frame. The clamp is pretty simple and is similar to other seat clamps that you will find. There are basically 2 bolts and you can tighten and loosen each one to get the seat at the correct angle. Now I actually quite like this design. It's straightforward, easy to set up and easy to adjust. The seat post slides into the frame pretty well. There seems like there would be enough grip, one would hope. You can see the marks from the previous install, so maybe there are some tight spots inside the frame. It's a 3-part clamp system, so when you tighten the bolt, the middle section will grip the seat post. I slung the seat post in there, tightened the bolt to 6 Newton meters, and I couldn't get it to budge despite all my efforts. It looks and feels like a pretty good fit. Now, looking inside the seat post, there wasn't much to write home about. It's just interesting to see more than anything, especially around the clamping area at the very end, considering this bar does take some serious force, aka your body full of roast dinner bumping up and down the poor carbon fibre. The headset bearings are 1 1/8 on the top, which is 42mm, and 1.5 inch at the bottom, which is 52mm. So a bigger race at the bottom, which means the headset is tapered. On initial inspection, the top crown felt okay. Then I noticed this little groove, which you can see clearly in this shot. This could have been from the previous owner, but I wanted to highlight it either way. Now it doesn't feel too bad inside. The carbon fibre isn't sharp or flaky. You're not going to be cutting yourself on it. Now measuring the cups, we can see they are roughly 42mm, give or take a few millimeters. The bearing is 42mm, so we need that to fit. Now putting the bearing in the frame, it was pretty easy to fit. Some may say too easy. Applying some pressure and wiggling the bearing, there wasn't actually any play though, so that's the main thing. Looking inside the frame at the top crown, there is this extra flap of carbon. Now, I'm not sure what that is for, maybe to support the bearings, or maybe it's just an extra flap. The bottom crown was better and had no grooves or issues. The inside didn't feel sharp either. Now, measuring the cuts, we were just over 52mm at various locations, which is as expected. The bearing did feel tighter when putting it into the frame. There was more resistance than the top bearing, for example. Again, when force was applied though, there was no play, so all good. Inside, around the bottom crown, there wasn't any issues, which is a little bit boring. I was hoping to find something crazy in there for a crazy thumbnail and video title. What's next? Let me get my bearings. The fork steerer takes a beating and it is clamped with the stem. Now, from the outside everything was looking good. From where the crown race is to the top of the steerer tube. Now, a quick check and we can see that the width of the carbon on the steerer is 3mm. Now, inside the steerer it's much the same, all pretty good. Interestingly, there was this divider or strengthening piece inside the steerer at the very bottom. I assume that's what it was. Now, for the frame we have 1,305 grams. The forks are 407 grams and the seat post with the bolts and the clamp is 205 grams, bringing the grand total to 1,917 grams. All in. So is it worth buying? Now, for $639 or £526, this has to be a good value frame. Yes, there are bits and bobs that can be improved, but realistically, you know these little niggles could be present when you buy a frame like this, so you can't really get worked up about them. I would say it's an entry level or winter frame. You're probably not going to have it resting against a coffee shop window on a Sunday when you are scoffing some cakes after doing 2 miles. The only way to truly know is to build it up and ride it. I could smash it through the Surrey Hills, through Leatherhead, and see what this frame is really made of. So what do I actually have planned? Have you worked it out? I've been leaving hints throughout the video, and here is the final one. Now, I'm going to meet a certain someone with this frame, and this certain someone may have been across the pond recently. The video I do have planned you won't want to miss, so do subscribe because it's coming very soon. Go on, click the subscribe button, and if you don't like the next video on this frame, you can unsubscribe. Deal?